Okay, I'm going to be live in just a second as soon as I get to my home slide. Well, okay, now starting. I need one of those clicker things. Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for this day, and we pray that you'll bless our time together as we discuss some pretty heavy topics. We pray that you'll give us wisdom, insight, understanding, and how the scriptures that we read about that foretell a time when, as we approach the return of the Lord and the setting up of his kingdom, what that world will look like. And we just pray that you'll give us wisdom to understand the times in which we live. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, so things already are going better than they were last week because we started like 20 minutes sooner. So that's an accomplishment, which means I get to go like 20 minutes longer, right? So we often joke about that. The reason why people want to get out of here. If I go longer, then the only thing you got to do is you got to get there before the buffet closes. But if you go too soon, then the Baptists are overrunning the place. So that's the thing. Southern Baptist. Not Northern Baptist. So, by the way, did you know that John D. Rockefeller was a Baptist? A very interesting story. This is totally off the subject. But, I'm pretty sure he was a Freemason. If you go to his gravesite up in Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland, you'll find that there's a very telling object over his grave. And it's a obelisk. And it's the tallest obelisk in that cemetery, by the way. And it's interesting, just up the hill is the grave, which is the second largest presidential mausoleum, tomb, memorial, whatever you want to call it, of all the presidents of the United States, and it's James Garfield. And Garfield only served for like 8 months, and he was he was shot early on in his term, so he really only served effectively a couple months. So he has like the second largest mausoleum. Have you ever been there to see it? Go up there sometime. It's interesting. It's a spherical building. It's probably 20 stories or more high, 25 stories high. And it's circular, and it goes to a pointed roof. And if you go into the interior of the building, you go downstairs, then the lower level, there's a room, and there's like that brick wall or concrete block wall that you can see through. It's kind of lattice work. And in there is his coffin. And it has a flag over it, and his wife's coffin is next to that. And I think there's a place where their daughter was buried or some family members. But on the interior of that wall, because he was a minister and a lawyer, which we like, we love guys who are lawyers who do ministry. I kind of like that, that's just my personal preference. But he was probably a Freemason also. He was with the Disciples of, what's now the Disciples of Christ Church that's headquartered over in Indianapolis. And I mentioned this once, and boy, somebody from that denomination really lambasted me. So that, all those things, comments, go to comments at fbchapel.com. That's not actively monitored. I don't even know if it's a valid email address, but give it a shot if you have to really vent about something. But in that lower level, there is a glass case. And if you look in the corner of the glass case, it has the architectural renderings and drawings of the architect who designed this mausoleum. And what he designed it, though, was he gives the full concept. So we see a circular building with a big point at the top. His concept was that was the core of a pyramid. And then if you look in the floor on that lower level, it's not the same as a swastika, it's the reverse, but it's the same sun god emblems all over the floor. Supposedly Christian pastor. Don't do that at my grave, honey. Just a friend of mine was not doing well a few years back and had instructions for his grave. On the grave tombstone, you know who it is. He's been here to speak many times. I won't embarrass him by giving his name. But he said, I want on this, the quote from John, though a man die, yet he shall live. And I want that on a above ground sarcophagus. That's where I want to be buried. And below that, I want you to engrave, temporarily closed for renovations, will reopen soon. And I thought that's pretty biblical if you believe in the resurrection. So we talk a lot here about the convergence of events and how everything just seems to be swirling around us on so many levels. Again, I talk, it's interesting, I listen to other people's prophecy updates, and they're all talking about acceleration and convergence and understanding, and they never really, a lot of them don't talk about logistics. So I was going to talk some about Babylon, but I'm going to forego that this week because I want to talk about it, because what I want to do is I want to present the different views on Babylon. Because we know there's a Babylon thing coming. I think we're in the building up of that system, and I think it's a system first. I think there's a religious and a commercial aspect to it. And then there's a location. And then, so there's a lot of controversy over the location. I kind of broke it down to about 5 potential ones. So I'll briefly, when I get around to doing this, I will present all 5 different views. Try to do that honestly. Sometimes I see people like they present other people's views, but it's clear that they haven't really listened to anybody else's that actually holds that view. So I've did a lot of research over the last couple of weeks, and eventually I get around to that. But the other thing we need to know is that as this Babylonian thing comes together, and I don't think there's any question but that it's coming together right now in front of us, the only thing I think there's a question of is where's the place? And I have some problems with some of the, really big problems with some of the views just because of the logic that's involved and some of the other things that we see that I think it assists in the end times. And I'll explain that. That's a very unclear way of telling you that I will clarify later. But the one thing we do know is that just as with the Tower of Babel that we read about in Genesis chapter 11, the people were going to do this, and they were like, God said, if they get this done, they'll be like gods. Nothing will be impossible for them. And we're really at that stage. It's not linked in the show notes. If you go to YouTube and you type in 10 stages of AI, somebody shared me, it's only like a 10-minute video. It's not a John Haller length video. And it talks about the 10 stages of AI and how that develops. And I do think that there's a connection between Tower of Babel, Babylon in the end times, and a lot of this artificial intelligence that we see developing so rapidly. But the Tower of Babel never got finished before the Lord intervened. And I hope that the Lord intervenes, but on the stages of AI, we're only like at 3 or 4. And they talk about things that are going to be like super intelligence. There were some developments on that this week. Tesla released a new robot. Google came out with Gemini. There were some, I saw a discussion, I think Tom Hughes and Scott Townsend on Wednesday had a discussion on Tom Hughes' program. It's only on hopeforourtimes.com website or on the app. They try to do that on Wednesday so they can talk about anything and not have the whole channel taken down. But Scott's a friend. I really have a lot of respect for him. We don't agree on everything. That's probably par for the course these days, but he's very intelligent, particularly in the area of computers and technology. He talked about OpenAI and the firing of Sam Altman, and that there was a concern that what had happened was, and there's been some documentation released from whistleblowers within OpenAI, that they may have gone a little bit too far. So we see all these governments around the world, the EU and our government, oh, we're going to regulate, we're going to control AI. That's not going to work. It's just that by the time they get regulations in place, people are going to have gone way beyond it. And what they think got released from OpenAI, or where they went, was they were able to train OpenAI. It's a large language model. It's not mathematics, but they had trained it with documents, and the documents allowed it to train itself on mathematics, and it was able to crack 192-bit encryption. Now, the encryption that you see on websites, if you go to a website and you got that little lock at the top on your address bar, that's 128-bit. So if they're at 192, that encryption won't work once somebody gets their hands on it. So there's a concern that this is going to get out there and it's just going to completely blow everything apart. Now, one of the things that's true with AI is it requires, like I keep telling you, drive out to New Albany, Route 161, and go south on Beach Road, and just look around. Biggest truck warehouses I've ever seen in my life for Amazon. And they have them to the north. They have server farms to the north of 161, then south. Then they have all those Meta, Facebook servers, farms, buildings, 6 buildings, each of them as long as the Empire State Building is tall. So it's like the Empire State Building laying on its side in a field. And it's just server racks that store data and compute numbers, figures, ones and zeros. But one of those buildings is devoted to AI. I don't know if it's completed yet. It was getting pretty close 6 months ago when I was out there. Google's got a giant thing. Intel's building that big chip plant. But all those things require what to operate? Electricity. And so my concern is we're closing coal plants all over the place. We've closed a lot here in Ohio. In the latter stages of my legal career, I was involved in some litigation over coal-burning power plants that some big companies owned here in Ohio. They're closing them down. But what are they replacing them with? So Microsoft recognizes this. They've got a $10 or $15 billion investment in OpenAI, but they need servers. They need electricity to operate the servers. And they also need water, a lot of water, to cool it. Now, to me, the simple answer on water, if you need a lot of water, go to Ontario. If you can find dry land up there to build on, Ontario, Canada. The province of Ontario in Canada, I don't know if you know this, has 40% of the world's fresh water. Surface water. 40%. Lake Superior is like 20% of all the fresh water in the world is located in Lake Superior. And you can put all the other Great Lakes into Lake Superior and then add 3 Lake Eries to it, and that will give you some idea of the size of Lake Superior. And they need water, but they need water and power. So Microsoft has determined that maybe the best way for us to go is to develop our own nuclear power plants. So can you imagine if Bill Gates was still running the company and you want Bill Gates in charge of nuclear power? But, by the way, he spoke at COP28, but I'm not playing it for you today. I'm exercising my gift of mercy, but I'll get to you eventually with some of the other stuff. But Microsoft went out and they got all the they're training AI computers on nuclear regulatory documents. Now, you can consider this a good side or bad side of that is they'll get rid of the lawyers. But what their goal is that the AI will be able to tell them how we can short circuit the regulatory process and get something built in a year rather than 12 years, because we need the power now. And that's part of the problem with a lot of things that people want to do in the world. It requires electricity. And so we have COP28 that goes out there and tries to do this. Now, this is, here's a little bit more on AI. This is NVIDIA. This is a company that it became a $1 trillion company this year. If you had invested in NVIDIA when it started up and you bought stock in it, it's gone up 10,000% or something to that extent. You would be, if I had done that, we would be doing this from, my private island next to my private golf course in the Caribbean or someplace. But and so these tech groups vie to lead new generation of chips. Everybody's trying to develop chips, and one of the companies that why NVIDIA went up so much money is it developed that big chip. It's about the size, if you look at it, and you see Jason Wang talking about it, it's about the size of an iPad. It has at least, if you go look it up, NVIDIA AI chip, and it's selling all over the place. The biggest buyers, Saudi Arabia. Other big buyer, United Arab Emirates. Oh, I thought they were just backward desert countries. Well, they got a lot of money because they sell oil. They have a lot of oil. And there's a question whether they're running out of it or not. I personally don't think that they are as much as people think. It may be more difficult to obtain. But their AI chip, size of an iPad, at least 200 billion transistors on that chip. That's a lot. That's a very big number. That's almost one transistor for every other person in the United States on that chip. That's and they're just scratching the surface. So the thing at the AI at the COP28, I have a ton of videos and all this stuff. I'm not going to play any of them. Beginning of the end of fossil fuels. That's what the UN said. Listen, the president, the guy in the upper left-hand corner, Jabbar, who is the head of energy, was also the president of COP28. Maybe he's the guy on the right. Well, anyway, one of those guys up there. The second guy in from the left, that's the guy who's married to the half-sister of King Abdullah, was married to the half-sister of King Abdullah II of Jordan. Remember, she's the one, she was his sixth wife. And as I've always said, a little life advice here, free. Your sixth wife is always the one that's going to cause you problems. And that's just a guess on my part. I'm still on, well, never mind. I'm still on one. But I think it's the guy to the right. He's the head of energy, and he was the president of COP28. And he said in a Zoom call, he said, we're not getting away from fossil fuels. And everybody went nuts. And so because this is the narrative that they want you to believe. It's not that it's true. It's that's what they want you to believe as they destroy economies all over the world to get to this thing net zero. And even people coming out, there were realists at the COP28 conference, and they said, we're not getting to net zero. We're not even get to this 1.5 degree thing. It's just not happening. And it appears some respects that the world is warming, but is it warming because of man or is it because of something else? Son of a friend went and climbed Mount Everest this year. Now, my reaction to it was, you raised an idiot that's in good shape. 18 people died trying to climb that mountain this year, the largest number in a lot of years. And as you climb up, there's dead bodies all over the place. Because they don't carry the dead body down, they just let it lay there, and it's frozen. So it's strewn with dead bodies up and down Everest. And the glaciers are melting, and there were, I think, 8 Sherpas that are highly trained mountaineers that serve as porters on these expeditions. They were trying to get across a glacier that's melting very rapidly, and it collapsed, and I think 8 of them were killed. And some of these are the most experienced mountaineers in the world. And things are changing that quickly. But nevertheless, the narrative that's coming out is, this is the end of the fossil fuel era. It's not going to happen. If it does happen, it means the economies are destroyed. And a lot of people will die. That's what's going to happen. And of course, the left, The Saudis were accused of obstructing the talks about this. Maybe they were. They have a lot of money at stake and that's the richest family in the world. It did really upset one person, Al Gore. COP28 is now on the verge of complete failure. The world desperately needs to phase out fossil fuels as quickly as possible. Sidebar, as he said shortly before he climbed on his private jet to fly back home. But this ambiguous draft reads as if OPEC dictated it word for word. It is even worse than many had feared. It is of the petrostates, by the petrostates, and for the petrostates. It is deeply offensive to all who have taken this process seriously. And it's hard to take him seriously, right? So this was a good... as to what they were able to accomplish, this came, I think it was from one of the United Arab Emirates newspaper's editorial page. And they put a little spigot on the end of the big spigot where oil comes from. Now, I found this, so we talk a lot about the end times here. I struggle sometimes to portray what I'm thinking about graphically. So I've done the graph with the horses. And you see that what they do, what is unleashed when these horses ride forth, and then there's a big argument. Are they riding yet? Are they going to ride? Is the first horse the Antichrist? I mean, so there's a lot of arguments about it. But my point is the horse rides, and until the Lord returns, whatever is unleashed by that horse increases over time. And it may be an exponential increase near the end. It doesn't like the first seal opens and everything associated with the first seal happens. I just don't think that's the way it is. It goes gradually, as I say, gradually then suddenly. And that's what all the first four horses, and I think those four horsemen are set out what happens in Matthew chapter 24, the birth pangs. But remember, this whole thing with the end times, a friend of mine said this, and I thought it was kind of a brilliant thing. So now I use it, but I don't attribute it to him specifically, because I don't know if he wants me to know that I'm quoting him. But he said at a conference, he said, this whole thing with the end times, remember, it's a birthing process. It's not a C-section. I thought that was a brilliant analysis of the way this is going to unfold. Now, I did find this morning. I have a fuzzier version of it, but this one is really good. And if I had any artistic talent at all, and I think my wife would attest to the fact that I don't, it was always, I got pretty good grades in school, but it was always a struggle for me to get the S in art and handwriting. So I've sort of taught myself how to make things visual. This guy really did what I had rolling around in my mind, because sometimes you see a seal with just 7 seals on it, and the seal breaks, the seal breaks, the seal breaks. I don't know that that's the right way to do it, because in this one, the seal breaks, right? And the scroll unfolds a little bit. And you understand, because it's a revealing, it's a birth process, it's an unveiling, and it's not like you get all the seals off and then boom, oh, now we know what's going on. This is the understanding part of Daniel chapter 12. The wise will understand and instruct many. Oh, it says that in Revelation or Daniel 11, so you don't have to send me that email. Daniel 12, 8, 9 doesn't say that, but it does say that the wise will understand and the wicked will never understand. So this unveiling takes place. So the first seal opens, that's the rider on the white horse, or that's the white horse. And then the question is, do we focus on the horse or the rider? And then we get into a big argument about that. But it unfolds, and so the scroll starts to unroll. Then the second seal, it unrolls more. Third seal, fourth seal, fifth seal, sixth, up to the 7th seal. And I think that's a much better depiction of it as we see. And so what we're going to see, though, is we're going to see in our time, we're not going to see. We are already seeing a lot of these things happening that are going to be more apparent as we go further towards the coming of the Lord. Because that's why I said with the seals, the impact of the seals sort of intersect. They kind of peak at the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. And we know that that's at the end of this period of time. Some call it the tribulation period. I don't think that's a biblical term. I like the last week of years, at the end of the Great Tribulation, after the day of before the day of the Lord. So there's a whole bunch of arguments that you can get into just in that statement. But I think this is a great, great depiction of how I think these things are going to unfold. And we're going to see some of this. So this is an article from, and everybody, so we're going to make the Times of London this week's guest prophecy updater. And it could be the London newspapers. We could just say the London, UK newspapers, because there's at least one other one. 4 meals away from anarchy. Experts are divided over how the UK would cope if disaster strikes and the lights go out. Now, there have been studies done about the United States projecting this, and if you're prone to depression, anxiety, and that type of thing, probably won't want to go look at those. So you might want to shut this off for a couple minutes. But what those studies have found is that if the lights went out in the United States, 90% of the United States is dead in 2 or 3 months. But I mean, think about everything that we use for electricity. All of our refrigeration. And I'm always amazed at innovation. So there's a Kroger store that I go to. I think it's the one right up here in Sunbury. And you know how when you open the door in the freezer section or the refrigerated section, it gets steamed up and you close the door and then the next person it's like looking in a fog. And did you see what they've done at the Sunbury one up here? In that refrigerated section, what they've done is they've put a video screen of everything that's behind it. So you can look at it, so you only have to open the door and take your stuff. Now, they haven't made it so when you open the door, you have 1.2 seconds to get your hand in there and get your thing and get it out. And don't try to take 6 of them, beverages. You have to, because but it doesn't make any difference anymore because you're not going to fog up the screen. Like the window, like you did before. It's very ingenious. But that won't work if there's no power. Not much that we do that works if you don't have power. Here's another one. This is from The Guardian, I believe. Quarter of freshwater fish at risk of being wiped out. I need to practice saying some of these titles before I read them. Quarter of freshwater fish at risk of being wiped out. And this is true. There's a collapse in systems all over the planet where there's trees dying, fish dying. And you wonder how long can the earth go on with all of these things happening at the same time. Now, people say, well, it's all man's fault. Maybe it's just natural, and maybe it's just the earth groaning and getting ready for the return of the Lord. Because we know that there's big famine coming, pestilence, and you need energy. So invest in energy stocks, wars and rumors of war, invest in defense stocks, pharmaceuticals, if you want to make some money in the apocalypse. Should be like the apocalyptic portfolio. Maybe we should start a thing. For $89 a month, you can sign up and get prepared for when your money won't be worth anything anyway. Here's another thing. UA ditching dollars. Are the Saudis are next. So there's a lot of concern. This is from Zero Hedge. And they could get the the guest prophecy updater almost every week because it gets pretty dark on Zero Hedge. But there's concern that the petrodollar is going away, and the petrodollar is what allows the U.S. to do a lot of what we do, like have everybody else finance our lifestyle. how long will that last? So some people think, if you remember about a year ago, everybody was saying, oh, the US dollar is going to collapse in the next 6 weeks. Well, it didn't. And it's still pretty strong. So if you want the alternative view to that, the Atlantic Council, which is a globalist, elitist, sort of like world order promoting place, but they have smart people there. So it's like Cal Thomas used to say. Cal Thomas, a great writer, used to say, I get up every morning and I read the Bible and the New York Times. Because in the battle of good and evil, I want to know what each side is saying about it. Bible being the good side, of course. And so I read Atlantic Council and I understand their orientation, but they have a very good webpage about will the dollar be replaced as the world reserve currency. They don't think it will. And there are a lot of people that don't think it will. But so read because it's a very complex thing. And all these contracts have to be changed, and you sort of need an alternative currency. Because nobody really wants Chinese reals or whatever what do they call that? Whatever the Chinese currency is. A lot of people, you just don't want a lot of that. Because the United States, you can go everywhere. I mean, we were in Israel. We went into the areas of Judea and Samaria, often called the West Bank. And if you have a dollar, they'll take the dollar. I mean, it works pretty much everywhere. So that's the thing. So there's a lot of speculation about the deterioration of the petrodollar. It says here, I'll be the first to admit that two of the main themes on this blog, the United States sovereign debt crisis and the deterioration of the petrodollar, have been extraordinarily slow-moving theses. That's right. And so I've heard over the last 2 years, it's imminent. The dollar collapse is imminent. And it's one of these gradually then suddenly things. But I just don't know when the suddenly hits. But I think it probably will at some point. But it's going to be chaos all over the world if that happens. So last week, my videos didn't work for whatever reason. And so I want to play for you a couple videos about the growth of anti-Semitism and how that's related. So this is going to be Elise Stefanik, Republican Congresswoman from New York. And by the way, New York got a ruling this week which will probably allow them to turn 4 seats Democratic in the next election because of the way they draw the maps. They can redraw the map now. So she may not even be a congresswoman. So here she is questioning the presidents of MIT, Penn, and Harvard. This was about a week ago Tuesday. And here's how that went. They're talking about anti-Semitism and calls for genocide and intifada on campus.
Dr. Kornbluth, at MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
Well, okay, so even the Financial Times had a big article on this, and the president of Penn has resigned, as did the chairman of the board. And of course, all the free speech advocates are, oh, this is just terrible. Look what we're doing to free speech. And I'm a free speech guy. You know, I know that there was the big case back when I don't know if I was in college or law school, the Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, which is where a lot of Jewish Holocaust survivors lived, and the American Civil Liberties Union defended that. And I'll admit it's kind of a tough issue if you're a free speech advocate, but it's the context of the world that we live in where anti-Semitism is just raging. So here is a graduate student. I believe she's a graduate student at MIT. By the way, the president at Penn, that's where they had the boy pretending to be a girl swimmer. And so if you criticize that person, get out of my bathroom, get out of my locker room as a female swimmer, you were disciplined. You would lose your scholarship. That's the school where she would have defended that. But call for the death of people, well, it depends on the context. Okay, the context is a world that's raging against Jewish people and soon to be and already Christians. It's happening all over the world. There's persecution going on. By the way, if you want to kind of get a context of this, there will be links in the show notes underneath. I did a few interviews over the last couple of weeks. I interviewed Jonathan Feldstein, Orthodox Jew lives in Efrat in Israel, talking about this, and his son is now a soldier in Gaza, and very personal. I mean, I thought it was just a very emotional interview. Then Brian Schrager, who lives in Israel, talking about what he's experienced, Brian, around here at church. And then I interviewed a guy I'd talked to 25 years ago, probably a couple times, John Leffler. John used to run a radio program called Steel on Steel, really one of the best apologetics Christian podcasts out there. He sort of closed up shop a few years ago, but through a friend, I was able to get his phone number or email, and we talked, and I said, well, let's do a little podcast. So we did about 55 minutes the other day, and John's a character. So instead of putting John Leffler for his name, he put Juan the Magnifico, and but it really was, at least on his part, an intelligent discussion about the things and some of the things that have led to this, in where we are. So part of this was what we would call the long march through the institutions. This was a plan. It came, they left Germany, they came over here, the socialists and communists, and I think John had a good explanation. The difference between socialism and communism is they believe the same thing, but the communist has a gun and weapons. But it's been a long march through the institutions, and it's at this point I brought up my suggestion that maybe it's time to extend the period of homeschool. It used to be like grade school, then it was junior high, now high school. Maybe we ought to homeschool our children through college, at least. And pretty soon it's going to be grad school. So I can remember, and he mentioned that Indiana State was one of the hot seats of this socialist move into institutions in the United States. And it used to be called Indiana State Teachers College, which ought to scare you. I have a master's degree from that school. And it's really where the first time I was a graduate assistant for probably the most conservative professor in the criminology department where I was getting my master's. I got assigned to the most conservative one. I think the chairman of the department kind of knew that probably would be the best way to go. But there was a young Marxist in the office next to me. I took some classes from him, and I told him, I said, I'm gonna parrot back what you want to hear from this ridiculous book that you assigned us to read, but don't give me that garbage to read. It's garbage, and you know it, because it was just pure Marxism. But so I didn't know that Indiana State really was one of the seedbeds for this, but we talked a lot about that. So here's an MIT graduate student, and she's talking about what she experienced.
Thank you so much, Representative Fox and Representative Stefanik, for inviting me here today. My name is Talia Khan. I am an undergraduate alumna of MIT and a current graduate student at MIT. I am the daughter of a Jewish mother and an Afghan Muslim immigrant father. I am the proud president of the MIT-Israel Alliance, and I am a Jewish student currently immersed in an extremely toxic anti-Semitic atmosphere at MIT. The MIT administration, namely President Sally Kornbluth, has failed to address the crisis of rampant anti-Semitism on campus. There is a radical anti-Israel group at MIT called the CAA. In recent weeks, the CAA's anti-Semitic rhetoric has shifted the culture on campus to such an extreme of intolerance that 70% of MIT's Jewish students polled feel forced to hide their identities and perspectives. An Israeli student whose identity and personal info was sold online for a bounty has not left his dorm room in weeks out of fear due to death threats. For my part, I was forced to leave my study group for my doctoral exams halfway through the semester because my group members told me that the people at the Nova Music Festival deserved to die because they were partying on stolen land. After a postdoc at MIT said that Jewish Israelis want to enslave the world in a global apartheid system, he falsely claimed that Israel harvests Palestinian organs and implied that the, quote, average Israeli is a Nazi. The DEI officer of his department replied by telling us that nothing he said was hate speech and that the organ harvesting conspiracy theory was, quote, confirmed. Day after day, the MIT administration has failed to enforce its own rules on anti-Semitic actors, such as the interfaith chaplain intimidating Jewish students, DEI staff publicly declaring that Israel has no right to exist, faculty dismissing student concerns for their safety by telling them that if they are scared, they should just go back to Israel. CAA protesters blocking the hallways, storming the offices of the MIT Israel internship offices and harassing the staff and faculty there, and inviting dangerous outsiders to campus to join them in yelling hateful and violent chants. This is the same climate of anti-Semitism that has led to massacres of Jews throughout the centuries. This is not just harassment. This is our lives on the line. The MIT administration has punted disciplinary processes to a faculty committee on discipline, which has thus far not received a single one of our complaints. MIT admin has even failed to staff a new task force against hate, which will duly combat anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. This atmosphere is intolerable. Jewish students do not believe that the MIT administration has done an adequate job to make students feel safe on campus. President Kornbluth, please let me go back to being a scientist. Let me go back to being a student. I don't want to have to keep advocating for Jewish student safety on campus. It's not my job. It's your job. Please do your job and act now. And if you can't, I'm asking Congress to do it for you. Thank you.
By the way, those three schools, my understanding is, receive about $45 billion in federal funding each year. Billion. Caroline Glick in a tweet said this week, look, if you're paying $100,000 a year to send, by the way, that's the cost now at Harvard, if you don't get any student aid, $100,000 a year to send your kids to this place and you're Jewish, you're a masochist. I can't argue with that. Gadi Taub, who used to be on the left, now he's a man of the right in Israel, wrote this, why Israel's the number one target of the global left. That article is in the description below. But look at this. This is from this morning's New York Times. Europe may be headed for something unthinkable. What it might be? Is it radical Islam taking over? Is that what it is? Look, and here, this tells you everything you need to know in the big headline insight. Elites are right to worry about the convergence of the center-right and far-right. So I know it wasn't written by James Carville. Remember, I played the clip of him last week or week before, where he said that Christian nationalists are as big a threat as Al-Qaeda. Okay, James, I'm sure you believe that. You sold your soul to literally work for the devil. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton a while ago. But the interesting thing about this article, this morning's New York Times, what does it tell you? What's one thing that it tells you? Well, one, they hate the far right, what they consider to be the far right, but that the people that agree with them, they're the elites. They call themselves the elites. So don't say it's a conspiracy theory to call somebody the elites, because the New York Times refers to themselves as the elites. That's kind of an interesting tell. You know, it's sort of like you're playing cards and you've got your big important card turned around backwards so everybody can see it, that they're calling themselves the elites. Here's another interesting thing. This is Mark Zuckerberg is building a top secret Hawaii compound on the island of Kauai. This is in Wired magazine this week. And it's going to have a 5,000 square foot bunker. The cost of this whole complex that he's building is estimated to be $270 million. He's making everybody associated with it to sign non-disclosure agreements. And if you post that you're working there on social media, you're fired. And everybody on Kauai knows that this is being done. And here's a little insight about it. Interviews with several people associated with the project, along with public records and court documents seen by Wired, suggest that since then, the planning and construction of the roughly 1,400-acre compound has been shrouded in secrecy. The property, known as the Kulau Ranch, will, according to some planning documents, include a 5,000 square foot underground shelter, have its own energy and food supplies, and when coupled with land purchase prices, will cost in excess of $270 million. Now, when you see that, does that bring anything end times to mind? Well, what about the elites of the earth, the kings of the earth? And by the way, a technology company head could be part of these kings that come about in the end time, these 10 kings that give their power to the beast. Because we know the beast is going to use what appears to be pretty extensive technology. So is Mark Zuckerberg one of these? I'm just saying I don't know. Do the math. look at the Bible, but what do they hide in? These elites of the earth. They hide in caves. And now we live in a world where the elites, who might be one of these kings of the end, are building their own caves to hide in. That comes from Revelation chapter 6. Am I really out in left field on that one? I don't think so. So, let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a moment. This is from the Daily Telegraph. There's also a big article in the New York Times front page this morning. Israel delivered suitcases of cash into Gaza. Look, we know that money's been permitted to go to Hamas in Gaza. Everybody thought they could manage it. One article that I read this morning, let's see, who wrote that? Said, yeah, it's probably bad. But why is it all, now they're still at war in Gaza, and they're like, oh, look what they did. They are the ones, they started Hamas, they funded Hamas, they caused it. And they ignored the warnings. And there's all these theories. It was a false flag. The Israeli government planned it, and they let it happen. They didn't. And look, it's clear they didn't pay attention to warnings. But my point is, if they had heeded the warnings that all the people were making, what would they have done? They would have done exactly what they're doing right now. They would have gone in and rolled up Hamas. And who do you not hear anything about? Like, it's not like Israel got their money and gave it to them. It's the money came from other places like Qatar. It came from there, and it was transferred to Hamas. It's not like Israel went to their own bank accounts and transferred the money. They got the money from Qatar, which got the money from Iran. And so nobody talks about Iran. Do you see the way this has gone now that, oh, it's all Israel's fault? They're the ones who are responsible. Not Iran, not Qatar, not the biggest funder of the Muslim Brotherhood in the world, a tiny country that's very corrupt. And so this is a big question. What are they going to do with Gaza? There's pumping seawater in there. This is from a Iran Twitter account. Unlike Gaza, where there is complete blockade, if Israel attacks Hezbollah, thousands of fighters will go to Lebanon to liberate the Golan Heights and Sheva Farms. And more about that in a moment, a little bit more detail about that. Israel says, Hezbollah, pull back in the north or we're coming after you. This was an interesting article. You know, one of the theories of the end times is that this beast empire is headed up by a revived Roman Empire. And this is an article from Wall Street Journal the other day. Look at this. Alarm grows over Europe's empty arsenals. Countries like the UK, Germany, and other countries, they don't have any weapons. They don't have any ammunition. I said jokingly, I didn't say it jokingly, I said it accurately a number of years ago. Germany had like 4 tanks that were operational. And I just said, so look, maybe Europe is the lead of this beast empire. I don't dismiss that totally. I'm just saying is right now there's not much evidence that they're going to be much of a power. And you'll see some other things in just a moment. Now, when I was in Israel a year ago, one of the things that they did was they took us down to the Urban Warfare Training Center near Gaza. We had about an hour, 2-hour briefing from a general who talked to us about, look, when you see somebody coming at you in a situation, you have 10 seconds to make a decision. And maybe less if they're running or driving a car. So a few days later, when Brian Schrager and I, we went to Mamre and Hebron, and we were driving through Hebron, which is where Israeli citizens are allowed to go. It's Area A, under the control of the Palestinian Authority, and they're forbidden by law to go in there. But because we're stupid Americans, we can go in there. And Brian said, as we're driving through, he says, if some of my friends knew where I was right now, they would freak out. They would be worried to death. And as we drove through, there were a lot of checkpoints. And at the checkpoints, listen, I said this and somebody said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. The soldiers were standing there pointing their guns at us with their fingers on the trigger at these checkpoints. Because something was going, I don't know what was going on. And so I said, oh, they didn't have their fingers on the trigger. Friends, I know a gun, and I know what a trigger is. I know where it is, and they had their fingers on the trigger. And I just had this briefing from this general a couple days before at the Urban Warfare Training Center. But I want to show you a video of what they face in these urban areas, because they took us to a mock-up of Gaza at the Urban Warfare Training Center. And it's just a mock-up. Tall buildings, closely quarters, tunnels. And it really brought home to me, like, this is very difficult urban warfare that they're fighting. So I did find one video from the IDF, and look at this as they're in Gaza City, what they're going through. This is live video that was taken. See, I mean, how many places are there where somebody could pop up out of and shoot at them? Look at every window is a sniper potential. So this is not easy fighting. There was 10 members of the Golani Brigade that were killed, or 8 members of the Golani Brigade that were killed. Tragically, that's one of their elite units. They had been lured into an area where my understanding is that they had set up like fake babies in cribs and all this stuff and booby-trapped, and then played sounds of children. So the Israeli soldiers went in, and of course the anti-Israel crowd all over Twitter especially, like, oh, look at how stupid they are. They went in there. Yeah, because they have a soul, which you don't, because you think that human shields are okay. You miserable people. Inhumane people. So Israel went in, and it was booby-trapped, and 8 soldiers were killed. And then when you understand that context, there were 3 hostages that had probably set free by Hamas, and they came running out, and they were shot and killed. Horrible tragedy. I'm sure the people involved will never, ever forget it. The families and everything, just massive tragedy. And of course, all the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian people are like, oh, good for them. Let them suffer in guilt the rest of their lives for killing their own people. But the point is that this is the problem that they face, is because Hamas people might come out from a building like this waving a white flag. The soldiers relax, and then boom, people pop up in the windows above and start shooting them. So like I said, so what the general told us at that briefing is you have 10 seconds to decide. And what you decide means whether you live or die. By the way, in the video example that they used was a car approaching a checkpoint. The soldiers decided not to do anything. At the end of the video, the car blew up and killed the soldiers at the checkpoint. And this is what happens. So this is a news report that came out that top Hamas brass in Qatar have been told to leave for Algeria as their security can no longer be guaranteed. Apparently, they've shut off their cell phones and left that area. I'm sure their billions that they have in personal wealth are safely stored. Here's a graphic of what downtown Doha looks like. This is a country of 300,000 people. Like, what's that, 1/7 of the Columbus area? Look at the buildings that they have there. Everybody in Qatar gets like $2 million a year from oil. Biggest gas field in the world. I'll talk about this later. This is like a 20-minute video and completely AI-generated newscast. Do you think we're going to see some crazy things in an election year here in the United States? I don't think we have any idea. So now this is an interesting story. It comes out of the Daily Mail. Putin had issued a call, this is a couple weeks ago, November 28th or 29th, saying, hey, all you women in Russia, we have a population problem. And you need to have 8 children, each of you, whether you're married or not. And we need to do this for 3 generations to replenish our population. Because look, Putin is a very, very bright guy. I think he's a very evil man, but I think he's a bright guy. He's a propagandist, KGB, all that stuff. Don't trust him, but he's smart. And he knows that Russia is in a demographic collapse. Countries, this is happening all over the world at the same time. North Korea, baby Kim came out and said, you should have more babies, all you Korean women, because we need soldiers. We need bodies. Now, in the United States, we take people and move them here, thinking that they're all going to be on board with us at some point. Europe is collapsing from this immigration, just illegal immigration, just like we are. I don't know if it'll survive. And the same call is being issued in Europe. Have babies. China's been doing this. As I've told you many times, China will likely be half the number of people that it is right now in a generation. Now, that's still a lot of people, but it's going to be a lot of really old people, and really old people aren't really effective in a war. I see some gray hairs out there, and I don't want any one of you, I don't even know if I want you to be a cop, let alone a soldier, because you're just not built for it anymore. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm not. So this is a big problem all over the world. So it's a problem. This is, again, these sympathy things you see all the time. The future is being bulldozed for the Palestinians, who are having babies, by the way. But their population is starting to collapse also as they became wealthier. By the way, one of the stories this morning was the leaders of Hamas in Gaza, their vacation homes are being destroyed. And so so remember, the narrative before this started was, this is a prison. This is a hellhole, is what the statement was. This is the largest open-air prison in the world. Then when Israel went in to attack, all the videos started being posted all over social media. Look at the wonderful beachfront property and condos and everything that they're destroying in the shopping malls. And we've known that this is what Gaza had, and Gaza could have had more if they behaved. Israel, or the United States, this is concerning me, restricting visas for Israeli settlers linked to extremist violence. And I don't know I don't think this is true. I think this is made up by our State Department, but we've issued restrictions on issuing visas to Israelis who live in the settlements. This is in the Jerusalem Post on Friday, December 8th. So Friday, a week ago, David Weinberg, is a lawyer, good thinker, the myth of escalating settler violence. A lot of times these people are just defending themselves from being attacked. So you'll see Israeli soldiers defending a group of Israeli settlers that live, what they say, over the Green Line in settlements, harvesting olives from their olive trees. And so when it's posted on Palestinian social media, what do they say? Look at the soldiers helping settlers steal olives from Palestinians. But they're not Palestinian olive trees. They're the Israeli settler planted olive trees. But they lie about everything. Remember the gal who was taken from the very pretty gal who was taken from that party that they had on October 7th, and they put her on the back of a pickup truck, and you could see her leg was obviously broken. And then Hamas came out and said, oh, she's alive, she's fine. Then they found pieces of her skull as they were going through Gaza, the Israeli soldiers, so she's dead. But I saw a picture of her. She was crouching down. There were some soldiers that had come out of the tank. I think they were injured. So they're laying by the tank, and she got in front of the tank, and she kind of crouched down. And so what did the Palestinian people, pro-Palestinian people, say on social media? Oh, look, they're using that poor girl as a human shield. I'm telling you what, the sewer that, I don't know why it's in my Twitter feed, but it's just like an onslaught every day. And so this is talked about in this editorial in the Arab News: humiliation and mass displacement in Palestinians, other war. Hamas also planned an attack in Europe. Let me see here. I want to skip that one. Okay, so here's a good article, link in the show notes. Caroline Glick, about a week or so ago, she interviewed Dr. Mordecai Kadar. Go watch it. It's like a semester of education about Arab Muslim culture. So Caroline Glick, JNS YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in JN as in Nancy S, not J and JNS. And click on videos and then scroll down and you'll see it. You need to watch that interview. It's about 55 minutes. It's well worth it. But Caroline says, listen, one of the big problems that Israel has is what's going on in the north. By the way, I'm going to go about at least another half hour. So that means I'm not going to finish at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, like I rarely do anyway. But this is really important. So I want to piece this together to you about what's going on in the north. So I have two long videos that I want you to see and a short one. So Caroline says, listen, we have all these lunatics running around trying to change what we need to do with the north. The north is a big problem. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's really dealing with it. So at COP28, the Atlantic Council put on a forum, a global energy forum, and one of the people they had was our friend Amos Hochstein, he was involved in the Obama administration for 8 years, then he was out during the Trump, now he's back in what I call the third Obama term, called the Biden administration. Caroline, she picked up this tweet and she said, this guy is a total psychopath. He goes on, he talks about the things that he's doing in Lebanon, because he talks about, I did this at the Lebanon border, and this is what we need to do. We need to do the Abraham Accords. Listen to what he says, and you can put it in context. It's about 3 minutes long. This is a week or so ago. When was this? December 10th or so at the COP28 meeting. This is Amos Hochstein.
Look, we've had examples of what is positive momentum and the kind of future that this region can have. And I think that in the previous administration, the great work that was done on the Abraham Accords and the remarkable decisions that were made by the government here in the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco to take a step towards a different kind of future. And to understand that if we want to focus on real existential crises of the day of climate change and economic disparities around the world, that's what we should all work on together. And the vision that President Biden has insisted on since the day he came into office is to focus on a regional integration. It has to be the path. Use that momentum to then support how we can better the lives of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. How do we use that momentum to create a atmosphere that is the opposite of where we're going now, of increasing hate speech and increasing demonization of the other side, and get back to starting to talk about what it brings us together, what unites us, and the same fears, hopes, and dreams that people on all sides of this region have that are no different than they are in the United States, Europe, South America, or everywhere. We want to have a better life for our families. And I think that all has to be together. So I don't think that we're changing directions. I don't think this conflict should do that. In fact, this conflict should be a doubling down on reminding us that if we don't go towards regional integration, peace, and security, this is the alternative. These are the two options that the world is facing and this region faces. And I think it's an overwhelming choice to choose the path of integration, peace, security, and prosperity.
And so they're pushing, this is Jared Kushner was in a meeting with the Qatar, whatever you want to call it, prime minister, pushing, is this interesting or not? Kushner, the former president's son-in-law, by the way, he got bailed out by a big loan from Qatar on his building in New York that he way overpaid for. I think it was the most expensive commercial building transaction in world history. It was just under $1 billion for a building located, it was the old AT&T building, located at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York City. But I'm not, so this is Barack Ravid who writes about this. And it says this: Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump organized a private meeting in New York last Wednesday with Qatar's prime minister and a bipartisan group, mostly of Jewish businessmen and billionaires. Three sources with direct knowledge of the meeting tell Axios. Why it matters: Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani has been a key player in mediating talks between Israel and Hamas when he's not funding the Muslim Brotherhood and terrorism during their ongoing war, especially negotiations over the talks on the issue of the released hostages held by the terrorist group in Gaza. A source who attended the meeting said that the Qatari prime minister spoke about his country's efforts to release the hostages in Gaza and answered several questions about Qatar's relationship with Hamas. Sheikh Mohammed was also the leading point of contact for Trump and Biden administration on Afghanistan for several years when Qatar hosted a Taliban office. Kushner and the Qatari prime minister became close during the Trump administration when they led negotiations on ending a rift between Qatar and other Arab nations in the Persian Gulf. The other Arab nations didn't want anything to do with these guys because they funded terrorism. The agreement to end the crisis was signed 2 weeks before Trump left the presidency. And Jared's been out there pushing the Abraham Accords ever since. So I think you need, go read Psalm 83, put them in the context of this, and then of some of the things I want to talk about. I'm not going to take the time to read it right now, but Caroline in her article talks about what Amos Hochstein has been going. So I dug into it a little bit. And so in October 6th, the day before the attack down in the area of Gaza, this is in Al Akhbar newspaper. It's a mouthpiece for Hezbollah in Lebanon. And there is, guess who? Amos, as they call it. He said demonization, right? He meant demonization. So he calls himself Amos Hochstein, also known as Amos, however you want to say it. So I guess if you're an elite, you get to say Amos. My name is Amos. And if I was an elite, my name would still be John, by the way. But so he's there. And so this is an interesting article. The title of the article is Hochstein proposed his return and Tel Aviv is angry about the negotiations being exposed. Did the enemy back down from offering to evacuate the Romans? So look at what there is. This is the words of the article. And again, this translation from Arabic, so it's not perfect. There's no one in Lebanon who wants war with Israel right now. He, the acting Lebanese prime minister, told Hochstein, you always talk about Hezbollah's weapons and their spread to the south, and you know that as long as they are occupied Lebanese lands, no one is ready to discuss the issue of the party's weapons. So what does that tell you? They think that anything in Israel is occupied lands. What they really want is they want Israel to evacuate all the way to south of Haifa. This is not going to happen. Will you guarantee, Hochstein asked, what if Israel agrees to evacuate all the points that Lebanon considers occupied? Will you guarantee Hezbollah's withdrawal from the borders and that there will not remain a pretext to justify its military deployment? So Israel wants people to move north. Hezbollah wants Israel to move south. But do you think they're going to stay in the north? They're going to stay like north of the Litani River? Or they're going to stay up in Beirut? And so the thing that Israel's wrestling with right now is, what do we do with Hezbollah? What do we do with Lebanon? And the answer may be, unless there's some miraculous agreement negotiated, maybe that's coming, just saying, about this, they have to make southern Lebanon and Beirut look like Gaza. I just don't see how there's any other way to deal with the issue. And I'll play you a clip in just a moment. So this is what Hochstein is talking about. So he's over there. He negotiated the maritime border deal, remember? And then this week, he's lower right-hand corner. He's in Lebanon again. And this is how they describe him, the Al Akbar newspaper. The godfather of the path is U.S. President Energy Security Advisor Amos Hochstein, from whom his friends in Lebanon report a special interest in the situation of the South for personal and political reasons. And we'll see that. So we see there's talk about this Resolution 1701 and how that's going to be implemented. There's this article at Sufan Center. Israel turns attention to Hezbollah amid northern escalation. And it talks about Hochstein here. It says, sought to broaden his November discussions in Beirut to include the two countries' land borders. Land border talks would necessarily also encompass discussions on how to compel Hezbollah to pull its militia back from the border. And there's one way. They can agree to do it, or you can just obliterate southern Lebanon. They don't want to live there. And that's what Israel's planned for a long time. So I remember there was this dispute over the maritime border. So if you see here in this picture, let me, how do I do this? There we go. Okay, so you have the gas fields. So you see Haifa, you see Nahariya, and then you see the Lebanon border just north of Nahariya. The way international law is, the border would then go a little bit to the north out into the Mediterranean. That's the Israel proposal. So Israel would pick up a lot of that Kana field and Block 9. And there's buoys there along the border, maritime border there at a place called Rosh Hanikra. There's a grotto there, tunnel, and there's a railroad tunnel that goes through the mountain, the rock outcropping there. So Israel says, we get the north. And Hezbollah says, no. Lebanon says, no. Originally, they said it was line 23. And Israel said, no way. Look, you're going to get all that extra part of the Kana gas field. That's billions of dollars, maybe. We're not going to get that. So somebody came in 2004 or 5 and made a compromise line there, HOF in the middle. Then when Lebanon really figured out that there's more gas out there, they said, well, no, we really meant line 29. That's the one we want. So they compromised on line 23 under the auspices of Amos Hochstein a year ago. And remember, Israel had the caretaker government, and they signed the documents as they were on the way out the door before Netanyahu came in. Yair Lapid, who was the acting prime minister at the time, signed that document. And Hochstein came back almost like Neville Chamberlain, look, we have peace for our time type thing, with this agreement. And it's a horrible agreement, which means when you do something like that in the Biden administration, you get to do more. So now he's trying to do it with the land problems that they have. And there's a lot of oil resources there. Here's Jake Sullivan talking about, here's a thing that he came out with. He met with the Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president. Here's a little clip of an interview that he gave to Israel Channel 12.
It does seem like there is a disagreement. Maybe you can correct me and say there isn't, about the future of Gaza. The President of the United States is saying that the future is a revitalized Palestinian Authority, and Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, I won't repeat this mistake and return the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. That doesn't add up together. That does sound like a disagreement.
Well, look, I can't obviously speak for the Prime Minister. What I can do is, on behalf of President Biden, lay out how we look at this issue. The way we look at it is that ultimately governance of the West Bank and Gaza needs to be connected. And it needs to be connected under a revamped and revitalized Palestinian.
What does that mean?
Well, that's a good question. And that's something that requires intensive consultations with the Palestinians first, as well as with the Israeli government. But it will require reform. It will require an updating of how the Palestinian Authority approaches governance. It will require the participation of other countries in the region to contribute financial resources and other forms of support. All of that has to be an inclusive conversation, and one in which I think we can actually build towards a consensus if all of us approach it in good faith. At the end of the day, the goal should be to have a West Bank and Gaza connected under common leadership that does not represent any form of terrorist threat to Israel, and we are determined to arrive at that day.
So you're saying that the Israeli government essentially is willing to discuss that future with your administration?
Well, like I said, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who obviously has spoken on this issue himself. What I am going to say is that they are prepared to talk to us very much, and we had some of these conversations today about what the question of governance and civil administration looks like, the question of security, and the question of reconstruction. And in each of those areas, there's work to do to get to clear answers going forward. And ultimately, at the heart of those answers has to be the aspirations of the Palestinian people themselves, but it also has to take into account Israel's security needs. And we're determined to do both of those.
And so the surveys that are coming out now say that in the West Bank area, that Hamas has 85% support for what they did on October 7th among Arabs. It's actually more in the West Bank than it is in Gaza, by the way. And so the Sullivan goes, well, they're willing to talk to us. Israel's willing to talk to us. I hope they're willing to talk to you to tell you that you're a moron, that you don't understand this. You're thinking like a Western person. And so Amos Hochstein, remember, there's pretty big oil and gas reserves, but Russia has hundreds and hundreds of times more gas than around here. But it's important to these smaller countries. So Israel, what they found they can do. By the way, this Block 9 that we've talked about, that's here, Block 9 there, after the agreement was signed, and this is maybe good news, not so good if you're in Lebanon, which is collapsing. I don't even know if they have a government really anymore. The economy's in shambles. But Hezbollah has money because they get it from Iran. They put out a big oil rig, drilled for a few months, and guess what they came up with? Water. Nothing. So in their Block 9, where they thought they were going to get all these resources and revive their economy, nothing. Now, I personally think that has kind of a supernatural aspect to it, because Israel's finding gas whenever they stick, a hole in the ground out there in the Mediterranean. So now this just happened within the last week or so. And remember, Israel was going to build this pipeline to go up to Cyprus and across to Crete and then up to Greece to get gas to Europe, because we're having the dispute with Russia and everything. And then there were all these people that were making these economic zone claims. Turkey came in and said, well, we have an economic zone from Turkey all the way down to Libya. It was fake. And so Turkey was saying, well, you can't go across our thing without a permission. But listen, you could put a pipeline up here, a short pipeline up to Turkey and connect to our gas pipeline, and you can go through our country. Oh, by the way, yeah, you will pay a transit fee of, lots of money to get the gas from there. But we're willing to do that. And I don't think that Erdogan's sudden love for Israel, fake love for Israel that he was demonstrating was anything but to accomplish this. And by the way, Putin had come out, he is now saying he could supply the gas, a lot of the gas, because one of the Nord Stream pipelines was not destroyed. He said that at a press conference, the Valdi Discussion Club, and I think that happened before this attack in Gaza. Now the word I'm getting from contacts is that Russia has been quietly repairing the Nord Stream pipelines because they want to get the money back. So I don't know if that's true or not. Biden is not getting along with Israel very well. And this thing, like here's from even the Financial Times Global Affairs, Gideon Rockman writes the other day, the mirage of the two-state solution. And I love the way they put the artwork. Now, Melanie Phillips also has a great article, and I think that link is also in the show notes, The Persistent Two-State Delusion. She was on radio, and this is what she had to say about the two-state situation.
The majority of Palestinians actually want the death of Israelis, and they want Israel gone.
Here we go. Okay.
The majority of Palestinians actually want the death of Israelis, and they want Israel gone. What Israel is fighting actually is Iran at the moment through its proxy, Hamas. But this idea that the Middle East conflict, insofar as it is between Israel and the Palestinians, the idea that that is about the division of land is simply wrong. This is the illusion that the West has pursued for decades. It is not about the division of land. If it was about the division of land, a state of Palestine living next to a state of Israel, it would have been solved in the 1930s. It would have been solved every single time this state of Palestine has been offered to them. But they have turned it down because they make it absolutely clear, something that the British media very, very rarely, in fact, never talks about. Their aim, and I'm not talking about the Hamas, I'm talking about the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas. Their aim is the destruction of Israel. They say so. They say so in Arabic. They say so in their insignia and maps, which if you look at what the state of Palestine would look like, it is Israel. It is not these disputed territories. You can see it in their educational materials, in which they teach their children. This is the Palestinian Authority. They teach their children that their highest calling in life is to murder Jews and steal all their land, to take Jaffa, Tel Aviv, Haifa. These are Israeli cities. They want the lot. And they say so. They also say it's holy war, that Israel is intent on destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This lie has ignited Islamic jihadi hysteria since the 1920s. It is a total lie.
So there's no hope?
There is no hope as long as the West continues to fund, legitimize, sanitize, and incentivize the genocidal attack on the Jewish people in the state of Israel. That's what's kept this terrible war going.
And so when she talks about the insignia, here's like Hamas. And so up at the top, you see there's this Israel. That's what they view. That's what they view as Palestine. From the river to the sea. That's what they want. No Israel in their thing. Here's Palestinian Islamic Jihad on the right. That red, that's all of Israel. Here is Fatah. They come out with an anniversary logo each year. Their 48th anniversary was, do you see the scarf there on the right in the shape of the state of Israel? You see the red thing in the middle in the shape of the state of Israel. That's the 54th or 55th one that they came out. We have this problem too. The Houthis are attacking ships in the Red Sea, preventing them from going up to the Suez Canal. It's affecting world shipping. It's This is a report on what's going on. The ships are stopping. The big shipping company said, we're not going through the Red Sea. The U.S. and Britain shot down 14 drones or missiles the other day, just yesterday. And so to get there, it's like a 12 to 20 day extra to go all the way around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa to get to Europe. It's not the safest passage in the world. And so this is affecting world shipping. And it's just the Houthis down there in this, funded by Iran, and nobody's attacking Iran. It's absolutely insane. I'm going to skip over a couple things. I have this is a briefing by Saret Zahavi. It was the other day at, she's from Israel-alma.org, Alma Research in the north. She talked about, I'll just summarize what she said. She did about a 30-minute briefing with the IDSF. If you go to the IDSF website, you can find the briefings. You have to scroll through till you get to December 11th, last Monday. She said, listen, we've got a problem here. Every third home is connected to Hezbollah in the north, in southern Lebanon. And sure, there are UN forces up there, UNIFIL, they call them. I think UNIFIL is a way of saying incompetent. They don't do anything. So they don't go to olive groves. They don't go check tunnels. They don't check houses. They just kind of drive around and make sure the Hezbollah people, if they have a flat tire, they help them fix it or something. They're useless. But she says every third home. And so there's some significant historical things. So the big circle at the lower center is Haifa Bay. Just to the north along the coast, that's Nahariya. Then you have the Lebanon border. And then to the north of that, that's a biblical city called Tyre. And then you go north, the next one up is Sidon, and then the next one up is Beirut. And so to give you some idea of the distance, the big circle in the upper right, that's Damascus, 50 miles as the crow flies from Damascus to Beirut. Not that far. But Tyre and Sidon, go read Psalm 83 and you'll find Tyre and Sidon. So I'm just wondering if the Abraham Accords and something in the next war that's coming up there makes that area come into the Abraham Accords. Go read Psalm 83. You will find those places identified in Psalm 83. The line, if you go of the line, the border line, the circle there in the middle, that's Tel Dan. No, that's, let me zoom in here. That's Majel Shams. I have another place I thought where I put Tel Dan. Anyway, so over here in this, you see Majel Shams, that's far north, that's Golan Heights. Then you have Tel Dan is near Kiryat Shimona. And I thought I had another map. Here it is. There we go. So here is a town called Gajar. That's largely Israeli, but the UN decided to divide it. The big circle, that's the area of Golan Heights called Sheba Farms. And this is what Amos Hochstein is over there, Amos Hochstein, over there negotiating away, say he's going to negotiate a deal and then he's going to go to Israel. You know, you're going to have to accept this because this is the best you're going to get. And he wants to negotiate that all away. Tel Dan is there in the circle inside the big circle. Mount Hermon is up there to the north. Over there on the right, that circle, that's where Caesarea Philippi is. And it's only a couple of kilometers, couple miles from Caesarea Philippi to Tel Dan. They'll give you an idea how close it is. I think Tel Dan to Gajar is 2 miles. So it's less over there to Caesarea Philippi. But they want to give away Gajar, and this would give away the Golan Heights. And you need to understand that. Caroline Glick has been talking about that for a long time. What the U.S. administration wants to do is undo Trump. They really want to undo the Abraham Accords or reconstitute them. And remember, Trump said, hey, the Golan really belongs to Israel. Remember? And this is what she was talking about months ago, that Amos Hochstein was over there, and he was over there just the day before the Gaza attack from Gaza, negotiating this stuff. Because, well, I did such a great job with the maritime border. I got that Israeli government. And so that's why Biden comes out this week and says, well, I think we really need that. We need a change in the Netanyahu government. You see how this is all fitting together? Tony Badrin, who is a treasurer, he has a good article at Tablet Magazine. Iran sponsored the October 7th massacre, and America paid for it. And of course, released $10 billion towards this. The Wall Street Journal reported this on October 8th, that Iran helped the operation. He says this, sure, there's a degree of complicity when a state sponsor for the last 30 years has financed, armed, trained, and hosted the leadership of a Palestinian terror army, including by establishing a joint operations room in Lebanon, which oversaw the last war in Gaza in 2021. But Kirby, he's a presidential spokesperson, national security guy or something. He's been all over the place in government. I hope he doesn't get a pension for everyone that he serves in. But Kirby added, in terms of the specific series of attacks we have seen, we just don't have direct evidence. And that's what they see. And so that's why you see today's New York Times. Israel didn't act on secret record of Hamas money. So Israel's at fault. But wait, where did the secret Hamas money come from? Who funded it? Why don't they ask that question? And of course, they would take the Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes, notice I see nothing response. So here's a great graphic. I have one about 10-minute video. I'm just going to play it. If you have to leave, go ahead. And you can catch this on the live stream. By the way, there will be links to the interviews that I did in the show notes. But I thought this was great. The Russian bear, the Chinese leopard, and the Iranian mullah slicing up the Eastern Hemisphere. Well, slicing up the world, and they're heading towards the Western Hemisphere. I think that's a very excellent graphic. I don't remember the newspaper that I got that from, but I have a video in here someplace that I want you to see. And somehow it didn't get saved. So I'm going to play it. So give me 1 second here to put it in. I skipped around a little bit. I'm just trying to see if I somehow skipped over it. Boy, don't know how that happened. Okay, hang on. My production assistant really fell down on the job. Okay, this is an interview. You can go to his Rumble channel. This is Avi Abelo, who I met in the Old City Jewish Quarter last year ago when I was in Jerusalem. This is Dr. Mordecai Kadar on the left, an absolute treasure, probably the leading Muslim Arab expert in the world, certainly within the top 3. This will be about 8 minutes. And they're talking about, what do we do? What are we doing with Hamas? What are we going to do in the north? You can go to Avi Abelo's YouTube, Rumble channel, Avi, A-V-I, A-B-E-L-O-W, A-B-E-L-O-W, all one word. Put that in the search bar, go down, scroll down a couple videos, and you'll see Dr. Kadar's interview done a few days ago. And let's just listen to a little bit of this, and then we'll pack it in.
Right, so I'm going to come back to the whole discussion about the destruction of Hamas in a second. I first want to stick with Iran and Hezbollah, because according to my own thinking, and I've been explaining this to other people, Israel will have to attack Hezbollah as part of this war effort in one way, shape, or form. Because for years, Israelis know that Iran via Hezbollah were planning. We've known about Iran's plan via Hezbollah to attack Israel, attack Israeli yishuvim, towns and cities up north, infiltrate via tunnels, kidnap and kill in the cities and in the towns, and then go back into Lebanon. We've known about that, but no one's really taken it seriously. But now that what Hamas did to Israelis in communities down south, all the Israelis who live up north on the border with Lebanon now know Hezbollah is on the border. They can actually see Hezbollah fighters on the border fence. they don't want to return home, and they won't return home.
And they're right.
Until Israel takes care of the Hezbollah threat, so that they don't feel there is a threat anymore. So even though Iran is holding back Hezbollah and only having them on a low flame, Israel must continue this war. It cannot protect the Israeli population who live up north until they take care of the Hezbollah threat. How do you respond to that?
Let's assume, theoretically, that Israel actually starts a war against Lebanon and destroys all the power of Hezbollah, blows up all the missiles, and everything which they have, Israel destroys. Let's assume. And if you don't continue to govern the place, they will renew.
Southern Lebanon.
Well, in Lebanon, they will renew the missiles. It will take 15 years, of course.
Maybe following your logic, we have to return to have a security area in southern Lebanon.
No, we have to occupy Lebanon because they can do it to north from the security zone.
Or instead of using that language, we have to reclaim and liberate biblical Jewish lands that is today southern Lebanon.
But by the way, the word Beirut is actually a Hebrew word. Be'erot.
Really?
Wells.
Really? Really?
Right. This is the name. Be'erot.
And why is Beirut named Be'erot?
They took the Hebrew word Be'erot. This was the name of the place. The Hebrew name. And they turned it in. Look, Sidon is Saida in Arabic. Tzor is Sor. Okay, so they took the Hebrew names and they just saying it in Arabic. That's all.
No, I'm with you. I agree.
So, look, in order to make sure that forever there will be no weapons against Israel in Lebanon, you have to control Lebanon constantly. So even if we occupy Lebanon and you destroy, theoretically, destroy all the weapons of Hezbollah, yet you have to be there in order to make sure that they don't renew their stockpile of everything which they have today. So since this is not not feasible, this solution to occupy Lebanon and to stay there forever, you have to come to a situation of deterrence. Deterrence means that first of all, the idea of proportionality should be erased from the vocabulary here in Israel. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court actually forced our armed forces to retaliate or to answer in a proportional way. Now, proportionality is actually destroyed the deterrence. Because you cannot deter somebody by saying, hey, if you kill one of our people, we'll kill one of you. The deterrence is being achieved when you tell him, if you kill one of us, I'll kill 100 of yours. No less. So be careful. Don't, because it will cost you a hell of a lot. And it should be a hell of a lot. Means, after Israel finishes the job in Gaza, and from my point of view, Gaza could be flattened. And Israel should take the picture and send to Hezbollah and say, see what we did in Gaza? This will be the fate of Beirut, so Sidon, and Tripoli. Once you launch one missile against us. Just be very careful. And if you really want to launch a missile, do it towards the sea. In order to save yourself from our retaliation or from our answer. Okay, this is the only way how to survive in the Middle East. And for, and also, if you are powerful and invincible, you get only a temporary peace, which will last only as long as you are powerful and invincible. This is why if Israel is powerful, invincible forever, it will enjoy temporary peace forever.
Right.
This is the only way to survive in the Middle East. This is not Europe here. It's not America. Here, agreements are temporary anyway. And we Jews are rejected because we are different. We are Jews. We are not Muslims. And this whole area is Islamic. and our land was Islamic land, Palestine, and therefore, and as you know, a land has only one-way ticket to come into the house of Islam and not to leave it. We Jews are not a nation because we are communities which belong to all the nations in the world. And this is why we are not a nation, so we don't need a state. And our religion is null and void because Islam came to the world to replace both Judaism and Christianity. So why do you need a Jewish state if there is no Jewish religion?
Right.
And the people, the Jewish people, are not a people. They are communities which should return to everywhere where they came from. So this is the way they look at us. Therefore, the occupation is not what happened in 1967. The occupation is what happened in 1948. Now, just let me show you. This is the scarf, which I think I showed here, but let's first see the scarf of Hamas. Look at this. This is the scarf of Hamas, this green heaven. And this you can see here, the land, the map of Israel from the river to the sea, with a book on it. And the book is open, of the Quran. The book is open in a place which says, and prepare against them, means the infidels. Prepare against them whatever you have from power and bound horses, in order to strike terror into the hearts of your enemies and the enemies of Allah. To strike terror means this is the verse in the Quran which orders the Muslims to use terrorism. So this is what is on this emblem, or this icon of Hamas, and this is the branch of Hamas of Birzeit University, branch of a terror organization.
Yeah, they're educated university.
So the whole Israeli state is here, means the occupation of 1948. While the PLO, which some people want to get them back into Gaza,
The Biden administration, right?
And this is the PLO flag, have Palestine from the river to the sea.
No Israel.
Of the whole Israel.
No Israel.
So where is Israel? So Hamas are from the river to the sea. The PLO from the river to the sea.
Palestinian Authority.
What is basically the difference?
Who's our peace partner?
What are the difference between their plan of Hamas and the plan of the PLO? Both are, the plan is to eradicate the state of Israel. And we Jews do not have the luxury of not to believe our enemies. If they say that they are going to exterminate us, we should better believe them. That at least that was their plan.
So,
because once in history, we didn't believe.
Right.
And happened what happened.
So, but we're living that right now because there are representatives and leaders of the Palestinian Authority who are on record saying in Arabic.
Rajoub just said
right,
it recently.
A number of them saying that October 7th massacre, there's going to be even worse in Judea and Samaria.
Right.
They're planning even worse in Judea and Samaria.
Right.
But our leaders are not talking about it. They're still only focused on talking about Gaza, and they're still talking about allowing more Arabs, workers from Judea and Samaria into Israel, just as they allowed Gaza workers into Israel 2 days before the massacre took place on October 7th.
Well,
so Dr. Kedar made some interesting comments there. It's about 55 minutes. I would highly recommend you go to Avi Abelo's Rumble channel and get that video. Watch it. Go to JNS and get Caroline Glick's interview of Dr. Kedar, which is really in depth about the problem that they face. It's good. I love listening to smart people, and these are smart people. You need to pray for Israel and what's going on over there. This is a very, very difficult situation. The leadership needs prayer. The soldiers need prayer. The stories that come out every day of these soldiers, and some of them got married just before they left, and now they've been killed, and it's horrible. And everybody in Israel is touched by it. It's really been very unifying for the most part in Israel, because they recognize we can't let up. We don't care what the world says. And I see Christian guys after Christian guys just caving on this issue It disgusts me. It sickens me. It maddens me. It's everywhere. And you need to be very careful with people these days. So let's pray. We'll try to pick up some of this maybe in a midweek or more detail next week, but a lot going on. But this is a very volatile world that we live in. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the gracious gift that you gave us of your Son, Jesus Christ, and his coming as Messiah to make the offering required for our sins and our atonement, and also for the gift that you gave us of instructing us in your word about the first coming of Messiah and the second coming of Messiah, so that we could understand the times in which we live. We pray that you'll help us to take that knowledge and put it into action, and to stand firm in our faith and act like men and do it with love, as it says in Corinthians. Pray that you'll bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.